Welcome to True You Ministries, the Christ-centered podcast for Christian women ready to stop struggling beneath the surface and experience deep, lasting healing. If you love God but still wrestle with anxiety, rejection, people-pleasing, or emotional wounds, you're not alone. And you're not broken. Each episode helps you break false beliefs, heal at the root, renew your mind with biblical truth, and walk confidently in your identity in Christ. If you're ready to break lies, heal deep, and walk free, you're in the right place.
And welcome back to the True You Ministries podcast. I'm Stacy Echeverria, your host, and joining me this week again is Tabitha Westbrook. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we had a great conversation in part one. It flew right by. We briefly talked about coercive control, trauma, and what that is, and the things that the church can do to help it be a safe place for those individuals that have experienced very, very deep trauma and even that consistent chronic trauma, if you will, and what to do and how can we help and come alongside. In this part, we're going to talk a little bit more about some practical things. And so let's get started with, for someone just starting their healing journey, what are 3 grounding practices you recommend they begin with today?
Oh gosh. So I'm about to give you a therapist answer. I'm going to say it
It's
depends.
Okay. Exactly. And it does depend, right?
It does. So one of my favorites, and this is usually accessible to people. So when I'm talking about grounding practices, I'm invitational. So this is an invitation. We can accept or decline invitations at no ramification to us. So I am inviting folks to try these things. And you might be like, I have tried that before and I hate it and I don't want to do it. 10 out of 10, that one should not be in your toolbox.
Exactly.
So these are options that you can use to populate your toolbox. Some are going to work really well for people and some are not. I think that I've heard so many trauma survivors go, I was told to do breathing exercises and I want to stab people when I do that. And I'm like, then we should not do those. Let's not do them. Is there some value in breathing? Yes, of course there is. But for people whose bodies are habituated or used to chaos through a traumatic experience, that slowing down feels very unsafe at times. And so we have to enter in a different way. Now, eventually you'll be able to do them. They still may not be your favorite. But we want to start with so one of the ones I like to do is a little bit more active, and it requires a little bit of our prefrontal cortex, which is our part in the front of our brain. Trauma, it hangs out in our feely parts in the back of our brain. So we want to stay in between them both. We also want your brain to be able to think as well. Sure. So one of the ways to reorient when you're like, I am upside down, is to use what we call 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that is our senses. It's just our 5 senses. So we start with 5 things that we can see and we name them. If you can name them out loud, great. If you're in a public place and you're like, that would really be weird, like church, like in the middle of the sermon, don't do that. You can do it to yourself. If you can name it out loud, do that. So for example, where I'm sitting, I would say, I can see my windows. Now that's one of the things I can see. Now I'm going to take a big, deep breath in between each one. So I'm going to breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth if I can. So I'm going to take that deep breath and then I'm going to say the next thing I can see, up to 5 things I can see. Okay. Now look, I count them off on my fingers because when I'm feeling dysregulated, I don't know if I got to 5 realistically. And so that's okay. If you need to count them, if you end up doing 10, it won't hurt you. That's also fine. So don't stress about that. But if you want to keep track on your fingers, totally do that. So 5 things you can see, and then 4 things you can touch. So that might be a pet. It might be the table that you're sitting in front of. It might be the seat back that you're sitting in. So anything that you can touch with any part of your body might be something that you would notice. And again, you're going to say it out loud if you can, and then take a breath in between each one. What I like about the breath in between each one, which isn't always how it's taught, is that it starts to get you back into your body. When we're anxious, breathing fast, our heart is racing. And so this tells us we're not being eaten by a bear. So what we're doing is helping our physiology calm down. And then we're going to do 3 things that we can hear. And so it can be the most faint thing. So you might hear traffic outside. You might hear the sound of your own breath. You might hear your child playing in another room or your cat meowing or something like that. And so you'll just do that. And again, taking a deep breath in between each one. And then you're going to do two things that you can smell. And if you can't smell anything, let's say you're stuffy, because I live in Texas, there's cedar pollen at times, and
Yeah.
there's cedar fever is a whole thing. So you might be a little stuffy, but you can
Right.
imagine the smell of something you love. If you can't
Mhm.
smell anything, so if you don't have a candle or a perfume on or what have you, you
Right.
can imagine the smell of cinnamon rolls or your
Mhm.
favorite beverage or whatever it
Mhm.
is, coffee.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that. So two things you can smell, again, taking a deep breath in between each one. And
Okay.
then finally, one thing you can taste. And you don't actually have to taste anything. If you have some mints or some gum or something like that, that can be helpful. Sour candies are apparently quite great when you are feeling anxious. I don't love them, so I don't use them,
Yeah.
but I've heard
Yeah.
from clients that it can be
Mhm.
very helpful. It can be
Mhm.
a sip of your coffee, it can be a sip of tea or water, or it can
Mhm.
be something you like the taste of that you think of. And so if you're
Right.
like, I really like cinnamon rolls or sushi or whatever it is for you, you can
Right.
think about that. And again, taking that deep breath. And
Yeah.
you can
Wow.
do that as many times as you need to help your body calm down and to
Mm.
help that physiology even out a little bit. And so that's one of my favorites because you can do it anywhere with anything. It's
Mm.
accessible no matter what your level of ability is. And I really
Right.
think about that because there are folks who are differently abled, and I want to be mindful of making these
Yeah.
things accessible no matter what your physical profile is and ability
Yeah.
is. And so
Yeah.
if, for example, you have hearing impaired or you're sight impaired, you may need to amend that and do more things that you
Mhm.
can see or hear or taste or what have you
Right.
to lean into those senses. So that can be something that you can modify then to be what you need, but just try to take that breath in between. So that is my
Yeah.
first and
Yeah.
most favorite skill. The second skill is to take a walk if you're able, or to do some sort of body movement. So
Mhm.
when we have a lot of energy and activation, so I don't super love the term trigger
Mhm.
because trigger has a negative connotation. There are
Yeah.
lots of things that are activating, good and
Right.
challenging. And
Right.
so activation is just data, it's information. So
Yeah.
if someone slams the door and I about come out of my skin, that's just data.
Yeah.
And I can go, what happened? Oh, this really reminds me of when my dad slammed doors when I was a kid. Or
Yeah.
this reminds me when my abuser slammed the door behind them and they left and
Right.
whatever. And so it brings
Mhm.
up all these feels, right?
Yeah.
Or loud sounds are just startling if you're human. And
Yeah.
so I can give myself a lot of grace in that
Mhm.
spot. But if I'm
Mhm.
able to, I want to discharge some of the energy. So if
Sure.
I'm feeling very activated, if I can go for a walk, and it can be a brisk walk and it's your version of brisk. Look, we're not running a marathon unless you want to run a marathon. I am not going to run personally unless I'm being chased by a bear and I'm still probably going to get eaten because I'm not real fast. So, in all honesty, so you do
Yeah.
what works for your body. And if you are wheelchair bound or you can't walk, you can just move some other part of your body that moves well. So
Sure.
even if
Yeah.
that's just your head, even if just turning your head is part of that,
Mm.
move whatever you can, and that will help some of that energy work its way through. And you
Mm.
can
Mhm.
also, one other thing is, again, connection is such a beautiful thing. We talked about that last time.
Yeah.
Is there a friend you can call? And
Right.
this isn't a friend where you like you're going to be like, I need to talk about all the hard things or whatever. Like sometimes you do that with people and
Yeah.
with the right people, but sometimes you
Yeah.
might just be like, you know what? I'm having a moment. Can we talk about like news, sports, and weather for a second? I just need to get my head in a different spot. And so a
Right.
good friend is going to do that with you.
Yeah.
Or if it's like, hey, I really feel like I just want to cry. Can you listen? This for
Mhm.
people listening who are in community, I want to encourage you. You don't have to fix it.
Right.
Sometimes you just need to sit there and shut up. Job's friends were doing great the first 7 days. They got in trouble after that. The first 7 days, they just sat there quietly and mourned with their friend who was mourning. And then they
Yeah.
tried to fix it and said all kinds of stupid things about God that were not true. And
Right.
so don't do that. Don't.
Right.
We do not need to
Mm.
spiritually bypass people. Romans 8:28 is beautiful and often misapplied. Right? Yes, God does work all things together. However, in the moment of hard, you don't need to remind someone of that unless God himself tells you to. And double check just in case it's your own heart. But sometimes we just sit with people. I always tell folks, and this is a bit of a graphic analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway. Like, I
Okay.
don't need you to fix it. I need you to hold the vomit bag while I verbally vomit.
There we go.
And
That's
so
it.
it's okay if someone calls you and you're like, I don't know which they need right now. And you
Yeah.
ask, like, do you want my help fixing it? Or do you just want to be heard?
Right.
And then we hear so that can
Yeah.
be another thing. So those are
Mhm.
probably my
Yeah.
3 top things to help
Those are
us in
great.
those moments that are super hard. And you
Yeah.
might need to do all 3 things if the moment's really hard. or any number of other things that you have. So we build a
Yeah.
toolkit. With my
Yeah.
clients, I create what's called a 911 card. And this is for
Ah,
when it all hits the fan. And our prefrontal cortex goes, I remember listening to this podcast where Tabitha and Stacy were talking about something, and I have no idea what they said because my thinky part has thinking itself right on out. And so we put it on a note in our phone or on a piece of
yeah.
paper that we carry
Yeah.
with us so that when we need to remember that we have some tools, we can remember what those tools are and actually
Yeah.
go do them.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love these. Do you need me to hold the vomit bag or do you need me to fix it? I think those are really great. And I think too, just being heard is so important because I know for me, it becomes empowering to be able to say it out loud. And then it releases the hold it has. It's just so when you have someone that you trust that can just listen as you're processing as well. For me, I process out loud. And I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to hear and just have that space to be able to do that. I think that's wonderful. And I like how you did incorporate the breathing in the first tool, but it wasn't breath work. It was
Right.
it was incorporating the senses into that. So I really like that. So thank you for that. I'll be taking notes on that too in case some of my clients need to dysregulate and re-regulate, right? Those are great tools. So then how can listeners identify if they need professional counseling versus trauma-informed coaching or counseling, and what questions should they ask when seeking help?
Yeah. It really depends on what you're working on. So you'll hear a lot of my answers are, it depends, because it
Yeah.
depends on the person. If you are working on things that have happened to you, things that you have not processed that may or may not need a mental health diagnosis, you need to get trauma-informed counseling. And trauma-informed is not taking one class and going, I took a trauma class and now I'm trauma-informed. No, you are not. You are
No.
dangerous, actually. So stop it.
Yeah.
And that's true of counselors and coaches. Knock it off.
Yeah.
You need to have a little bit more than that. I call us trauma specialized in my practice because
Sure.
that is the sum total. Like we have taken so much continuing ed on trauma impacts, trauma treatment, trauma, all the things. And this is
Right.
what we do all day, every day. And that is something
Right.
that you should hear. So
Right.
if you need something, if you're working on the past, if you're working on a traumatic impact and you're working on the things that you need to heal, right? So we'll call it, that's a counseling and therapy role.
Right.
And that's where you really need to be.
Yeah.
And that is, you can get a mental health diagnosis if you are a private pay person. So if you are not using your insurance, we do not have to diagnose you. It is not a requirement.
Right.
If you are trying to use insurance, you will have to have a diagnosis. They will have to consider the treatment medically necessary because counseling is considered medical care. Licensed counseling is considered medical care. So if you need that, like you just got out of a coercively controlling marriage and you are not even sure which way is up and you are like basically bleeding out in a ditch, that's a counseling function for sure.
Yeah.
So coaching is more forward. So how am I going to rebuild my life after coercive control or traumatic experiences or spiritual abuse? So I've done some healing, right? Not all your healing. You don't have to do all your healing, but if like you're not even sure how to get out of bed, that's not a coaching function.
No.
If you're like, I realize I have got raging ADD and I need to help with my executive function, that is 100% a good coaching option. If you are like, I have figured out who I am and now I need to work toward rebuilding a life, that's a great coaching function. That's wonderful for coaching. So coaching is not considered medical care. You cannot use insurance for it. A lot of times coaches will offer things in group settings and then with individual access. That's something that we do frequently. We do all kinds of basically coaching groups. One is we have our restore group, which is restoring your relationship to God. So dude, I'm not even sure how I feel about him right now. And I got to work through some stuff on that. And so we're not counseling, we're doing coaching about let's talk through some of that together in this group. We have a group around my book, Body and Soul Healed and Whole, that we walk through the contents of the book together. So it's not counseling, it's coaching. We're talking through the concepts in the book. So it's really a more present moment to forward focused function than counseling is. With counseling, generally speaking, you have to be in the state in which the counselor is licensed. Now, there are some licensure rules around that can make it tricky. Like I'm licensed in 5 states. So you can, but you can come. So let's say you wanted to do an intensive, you could come to our North Carolina office, work with any one of my licensed counselors there because the counseling is taking place in North Carolina. Now, coaching can take place anywhere in the world.
Anywhere. Yeah.
But again, you want to make sure your coach is trained. And this is true of everything. So the other part of this question is, how do I know if they're good? And
Exactly.
and that's a good question. So
Yeah.
I'm going to give us 3 buckets of humans. One is licensed counselors. They can be any type of license that's a counselor. So you might hear psychologist, licensed psychological associate, licensed marriage and family therapist, licensed clinical mental health counselor, licensed professional counselor. All of those things are licensed therapy that is considered medical care.
Right.
And so you're going to want to ask, what kind of trauma training do you have? Where did you get it? How much of it do you have? How often do you work with someone who's struggling with what I'm struggling with? What are the results that you have seen in these places? And you're going to want to catch a vibe for this person. We do
Sure.
free consultations with anybody
Yep.
that wants to come to us for therapy or coaching
Yeah.
because we want to make sure that you're a good fit.
Yeah.
And there's no shade in
No.
saying to someone, I don't think
No.
this is the right fit for me.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so
Yep.
you get to pick. And I think sometimes people will go to an intake session with either a counselor or a coach and say, I feel stuck now because I came and told you part of my story. And you're not stuck. You get to
Right.
choose. If you're like, this person is not my person,
Right.
then go find someone who is. I was talking
Right.
with someone who reached out to me for a consultation to just ask for help. I'm not sure if this therapy is good therapy.
Yeah.
And they were telling me some of the dynamics. And I'm like, I don't think that person is very trauma informed, despite what they say. And despite the fact that they're trained in EMDR, like the things they're doing are very contraindicated to your situation for sure,
Interesting.
which means
Wow.
they do not work. And
Yeah.
so they ended up going to that person's supervisor and saying, I don't think this is a good fit anymore from a therapy perspective. And the supervisor got some more information, was like, holy cow, you're right. And ended up taking care of that because the person was not doing good counseling,
Oh,
you know,
wow. Wow.
and so they were able to be reassigned to a different counselor that was a much better fit for this
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
And so don't be afraid of that. And when we are survivors of trauma, using our voice is really hard.
Hard.
So I know that's really difficult. I don't want them to not like me. Or let me tell you what, a good therapist, a good coach, a good biblical counselor does not think like that. My first thought is,
Exactly.
what do you need? How
Right.
do I get you to what you need if it is not
Yeah.
me? Sometimes as therapists, we make mistakes and we make a
Yeah.
misstep. Or like I remember with one client, I completely read something wrong and it responded to what I thought she was asking me and saying, and she was really upset. And I went, oh my gosh. And I had to make a repair with her because I really
Right.
missed her in that.
Right.
That is the attitude that a counselor should have, is
Yeah.
I want what's best for you, because
Yeah.
that's who it's about.
Yeah.
That's true again,
Absolutely.
counselors or coaches or biblical counselors. And those are our 3 buckets. So licensed
Yeah.
counseling, coaching, and biblical counseling.
Mm.
They're all a little bit different. And then
Yeah.
coaches, where do they have training to be a coach? Now, if they're a
Right.
therapist who's also coaching, they need to be very clear about what
Yes.
you are getting. So I am
Yes.
a licensed therapist. I also do coaching, and I am clear. This is
Yeah.
not medical care. This is
Right.
not diagnosis or treatment for a mental health disorder.
Right.
That is
Right.
not what we are doing. Here's
Yeah.
what this looks like. And if I think you need counseling and not coaching, I'm going to tell you, and I'm not going to not going to be the
Right.
person that does that, because I don't do dual relationships. So they should be ethical in all that they do. If they're saying that they're a trauma informed coach, they should have trauma training as well. Where did you get your trauma training? How much have you had? I have seen people do self-defense coaching for women, which I think is wonderful, but not be trauma informed or trauma trained. So they have people laying on top of each other, and you're like, that's not going to end well for somebody later, because they didn't get popped out. They didn't do things like that. If you are like a biblical counselor or a faith-based coach and you're using a bunch of scriptures without thinking about the impact, and we talked about this in part 1, then you are going to do some damage if you're not careful. So you want to ask some of those same questions. And again, like, what does your coaching package look like? What comes with that? It's a little bit different than maybe other things, and each coach does things differently. And then if it's a biblical counselor, what kind of biblical counseling training do you have? With what organization? How do you get supervision? Because there is very little required for biblical counselors. And this is something that we are working to change. I have 2 biblical counselors on my staff who do not suck. This is how I refer to them for that reason, because there are some out there. There are probably people listening to us going, oh my gosh, I was deeply harmed by a biblical counselor who, told me really bad things. And so you want to understand what their level of trauma training is. How do they get support if they need support? When do they refer to maybe someone with a license if they need to? What does that look like? Do they have a referral network for that? And so asking some of those questions, and then this for anybody that you're planning to work with, whether it's a counselor or a coach, how does your body feel when you talk to them? Now look, you might just be a walking state of hypervigilance because of the things you've been through. So fair on that.
Sure.
But there should be at least enough comfort.
Yeah.
You might be scared, right? Like I remember once
Yeah.
telling my therapist before I did an intensive with them years ago that I was like pacing in the waiting room because I knew what we were talking about that day and I was anxious, but I didn't feel unsafe. I felt scared. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
asking yourself those questions and going,
Yeah.
okay, what do I need in this moment? Like, how do I feel talking to this person? Do I feel like I can be safe with them? Do I feel like I can use my voice with them, even if I don't quite know how to use my voice yet? Those are all really good questions.
Yeah.
And to like really pay attention. A lot of times we have been so habituated to ignoring how we feel. And then we have that verse in Jeremiah, our heart is desperately wicked. Who can know it? And then that dismisses and spiritually bypasses every emotion, which is just baloney. And so I like to tell people, first of all, if Jesus and he lives in your heart isn't desperately wicked, because you've been given a heart of flesh and not a heart of stone. So let's start there. And the Holy Spirit lives in you. And these are God-given emotions. We do not live and die by them. We ask questions about them. We get curious about them. So your heart is desperately wicked is not effective in saying you should not think and that you should not feel. And so I just want to put that out there. So for anybody who's, I don't know, like, how would I know if anything's okay? And it's like, you do. God is in you. He is with you. And so trust that gut on that. And you may, again, have to go to a session and be like, I don't think this person's for me. But that's where a consult call is super, super helpful.
I agree.
And I know not all therapists and coaches do them, but I encourage them strongly if I'm training people, just because, again, with trauma survivors, they need to hear your voice. I try to do video consults when I can with people so that they can see my face. That way they have an idea of a little bit about who I am and whether or not I'm the right fit for them.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely beautiful. I do the same thing where when someone schedules a consultation with me, it's 20 minutes and I will ask them, "Have you spoken with anyone else?" And usually they'll say, "No, I'm just starting my journey in this." And I said, "Look, I highly recommend speaking with at least 3 people. Get a feel for who they are. Who do you connect with? Who do you feel safe with?" And I said, most therapists, most counselors will have a free consultation. And I'm always growing my referral network as well so that I can refer people to them as well. The other thing too is, and I do this as well, and I liked what you said. One way that I help those individuals that come to me for a consultation is if there isn't alignment or what they are wanting counseling around is not something that I am trained to do.
Yes.
Then I help them by referring them to someone that is trained to do it. Now, I'm a pastoral counselor. Do I have trauma-informed training? Yeah, 26 hours. Would I call myself someone that's an expert in it? No. I have a little bit of a foundation in understanding trauma, but that is not the basis of the work that I do. But at least I have some information, and then being able to refer out to people that this is all that they do. But at least I have some knowledge, a little bit of training, because the American Association of Christian Counselors, they have that certification. And I would never say, yeah, I'm a trauma pastoral. I am not. Does everyone that come to me have trauma in their background? Absolutely. But we're dealing with other issues with them too. And where it comes up, where they're needing specific help around the trauma, I refer them out. And that's the right thing to do. Because as you said, as we've been saying, we cannot be all things to all people. And we can't know everything. But what we can do as licensed therapists, as pastoral counselors, as coaches, because I'm a life coach as well, is who can we refer people to and get them the help that they are needing, even if it's not with me. And that's how we can help those people that come before us, for sure. So you mentioned a lot of really great stuff. It's worth for people to know, because a lot of the time they're like, what do I ask? What do I ask the therapist? And I help them with that. But you gave even more information, and I really appreciate that. So as we begin to wrap up, are there daily habits that listeners can use to start reclaiming joy, building that resilience, and reinforcing their identity in God, especially on difficult days?
Yes. So I will start by saying this. You are more resilient than you think you are.
Yeah,
By virtue of the fact that you have survived every bad day that you have ever had up to this point because you are listening to us talk, then
yeah,
you are more resilient. Now, that doesn't mean it was a good time. It does not mean
right.
that you had fun. It does not mean that you're like, I would really like Jesus to come back. Could we do this today? Not minimizing any of that.
Yeah,
But what I am saying is that you are far more resilient than you think already. So
yeah,
I want to honor that you have survived up to this point.
yeah,
Now, we want to make your survival just a hair easier. And so I definitely encourage that. But you want to lean into things that are good for you. So if
mm,
there are things, if you realize you are doom scrolling Instagram,
yeah,
that might be something you want to put a little bit of a boundary around because it
right.
is absolutely going to make you want to gouge out your eyeballs eventually because
Yeah,
it's really stressful. They
yeah.
know that the things that get clicks are the things that make us afraid or angry. Those are the two
Mhm.
highest click things if you read anything about advertising, marketing, things like that. And
Yeah,
so leaning away from those intentionally can be really helpful.
yeah.
One of the things I recommend strongly for people is when you can get out into nature, do it. There
Yeah.
is so much research about God's good
Mhm.
grain and how
Mhm.
it actually helps you heal, from the things that the trees give off
Mm,
that support our immune system to the fact that
right.
like just looking at running water, not the kind running out of a
Yeah.
pipe when it bursts, but like a stream or a lake or something like that. Your internal waterfall in your house is probably not it, but
Oh.
looking at some of those things really reduces stress, and
Yeah.
the effects of that last up to 30 days if you're out there for about a half hour.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, it's really fascinating.
That's
So, we
amazing.
talked about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 at the very beginning. You
Yeah.
can do that. We call it forest bathing. Forest bathing is not a naked adventure here, people. So, I just like to say that because people think bathing, they think naked. I do not do naked with people.
No,
So, no.
I don't either.
But it's really just doing mindfulness activities out that
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1 out in a natural environment. As far
Yeah.
as the taste part of it, you can bring some tea with you or a snack or a
Sure.
picnic. Please do
Sure.
not lick trees unless you know what trees you're looking at. And don't eat
Right.
mushrooms. What is the saying?
Right.
All mushrooms are edible, sometimes just once. So
Yeah.
if you are a trained forager, don't eat things in the woods. But you
Right.
can bring things
Right.
out there, do those things in the woods, and really
Yeah.
have some of that rest. And so
Yeah.
you're building again that resilience, right? So every time
Mhm.
you lean into doing something that is supportive and reparative, you're building your sense of resilience every single
Yeah.
solitary time.
Yeah.
Every time you stretch just a little, even if it's just a little, you're
Yes.
making more space for yourself and for the situation. And that
Yeah.
could also be as simple as putting together like a cozy reading corner in your house. Right? There's
Yeah.
what 850,000 TikToks on how to do that and probably 75 Amazon products with it. Get yourself a fluffy blanket. I do have a favorite tortilla blanket, so it is shaped like a tortilla. It is objectively the best blanket in my house. I literally love them so much. I gave them to everybody one year for Christmas. Like everybody in my life got a tortilla blanket because we all need to be a human burrito sometimes. So things like that, that just
Yeah.
bring delight and joy into your soul are
Yeah.
highly recommended, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
So those
Oh,
are things
man.
that again can bring resilience, bring goodness,
Right.
bring delight into
Yes.
our lives as we are
Right.
walking down a healing path.
Yeah, I love all that. One of the things that I don't doom scroll, so I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on TikTok, I'm not on any of that. I'm on Facebook because of my business, right? So one of the things that I recently got into, I love animals. We used to have pets and stuff, but anyway, I just recently came upon the bat sanctuaries. And I've been looking at the little bats, and I never thought I would be all gaga over them. But when I start looking at them, because the baby bats, I don't know if people know this, they're called puppies. And they're so adorable with the way that they eat. And so they're in a sanctuary because they've been rescued, something happened. And so they're being nursed back to health so that they can be released back into the wild. But I am fascinated by that. And I feel my body just relaxing when I'm watching these little critters and just enjoying what God has created. that just brings a sense of peace to me because like I said, I'm an animal lover. And then I've been watching like the Italian greyhounds, and I had no idea their nickname is they're known as Iggies. And I'm going, oh, okay, great. And they're just so cute. So that's the thing that I don't doom scroll. I do that. It helps me just regulate if I need to. It brings peace, it brings calm, I'm connecting, and I love that. And it's just a couple minutes and I'm good. But I'm also learning about these different animals too because I said, I'm an animal lover, and so it's what are the things that I'm going to focus on that are noble and good and pure and lovely.
Yes.
And I've made such intentional strides in, I'm not watching the news all day long. I'm not doing it. I'm not reading every headline. I'm not going down the rabbit hole. I'm not getting into the weeds. And I'm just going to stay focused on where God has me and doing what he wants me to do, because even all of that stuff can create so much stress and anxiety. It's fear inducing. And I'm going to put my trust in the Lord, and he is where I get my peace.
Yes, absolutely. And we think we have control and we don't anyway. And what you described and what we've been describing. So I don't know if you've ever sat in a sermon that is take every thought captive and you're like, how do you do that? What does that mean? This is what that means. And this is where I'm always like, could we follow it up with the practical? That'd be amazing.
Yes.
And this is the practical of it, right? Because we are saying, I'm going to intentionally put my focus somewhere better, somewhere healthy, somewhere more eternal, right? In cute little bats that God made, or in going out into his creation, or whatever it is. We're going to set our mind on the things above and not the things of the world that are good for us. And that is going to help us release some of that stress. Now, it's not going to solve every problem in the world. We live in a sinful world. It's hard. It's a dumpster fire, as previously stated. And so we might sometimes be like, I'm going to have to warm my hands by the dumpster fire. Okay. But we can also look at it and go, this is temporary, even if it doesn't feel like it.
Absolutely. And in that, it is putting and creating and implementing those healthy boundaries that we need as well. Whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, or mental, we need to have those healthy boundaries in place. And I know that's a difficult topic for so many people because they have an idea of what boundaries are. But I'm like, no, hang on. When you read the Bible, God has got boundaries. But in that, there's freedom. And so how do we incorporate that into our own lives? When I was talking with someone else, I said, not every good thing is something that we need to say yes to. It may be a good thing, but it's the wrong time. It's not the right season of time to be involved in something like this. So it's knowing what your capacity is, knowing what you're able to do at this point, but just having those healthy boundaries so that when the right thing comes to you at the right time, you'll be able to say yes to that.
Yes.
Absolutely. So it's all part of this healing process too. Boundaries are a big part of it. So anyway, I so appreciate the wealth of information that you have shared on, not just in part 1, but here in part 2. So how can people get in touch with you if they would like to reach out to you?
So they can find us at thejourneyandtheprocess.com, spell out A-N-D. They can also find me at tabithawestbrook.com. They can listen to my podcast, Hey Tabby. And they can also, if they want to, reach out and get the introduction and first chapter of my book, Body and Soul, Healed and Whole. And we will have the link for that. And they can access that. And also, if they're like, I don't know how to find somebody good and they want to talk through it with me, or they want to know if they're in the right spot for their own therapy or coaching or what have you, I'm happy to do a consult on that as well. And we also have blogs on the website on thejourneyandtheprocess.com that actually list some of these questions. So if it's helpful, folks can go there and take a look at that and get that information as well.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. You're such a great resource and just a wealth of information. So thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate everything that you and your staff are doing to help people in their healing journey.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And for those of you that have been watching and listening, if you have questions about faith, if you're struggling with your faith, I would love to talk with you. You can reach me on my website at trueyouministries.com or email me at info@trueyouministries.com. I also have a free 20-minute consultation. You don't even have to consider me as a biblical counselor for you that you're going to hire. But if you want to talk about faith and things that you might be struggling with, I would love to be able to walk alongside you and lead you to who may be able to help you if it isn't me. So thank you to everyone that has been watching and listening. And I pray that the Lord would bless. Hold on. Thank you to everyone that has been watching and listening. And I pray that the Lord would bless you today.
Thank you for joining me on True You Ministries. If today's episode encouraged you, be sure to subscribe and share it with a friend who needs hope and healing. Remember, freedom is possible, healing is real, and your identity in Christ is worth walking in. Until next time, keep breaking lies, healing deep, and walking free.